Happy New Year. First video of 2018, and I've been sick the whole year, so if my voice crackles out or acts funny, forgive me. So I frequently talk about properly advising your customers. And so as many of you have seen this car before, the red twin charge STI that showed up twin charge is no longer twin charge. The customer had hopes of doing 1,000 wheel horsepower with it. And apparently the guys that built the motor for him told me that it was all totally possible to do the whole setup. And so far, pretty much everything that has been done to the car has been incorrect, unfortunately. We had to redo everything. One of the issues I was having with it at idle was it liked to surge. I've never had a Subaru surge like this thing surge. It was really odd. And to me, it really just seemed like cam timing was off bank to bank by the way it was responding with the airflow ratio and timing, that kind of stuff. So we did a compression test on it. Sure enough, it was off 15, 20 PSI from one bank to the other, which is a little bizarre. And it was kind of low. It was like 115-ish, I think it was, right? PSI, which with big cans makes a little bit of sense. But still, it was unsettling. The bank-to-bank difference was the biggest indicator that something wasn't right. Usually that means someone has the wrong size head gaskets on the car. If they're too thin, then what that means is that the engine isn't as wide as it was before, and it basically makes the timing belt too long in that regard. And the timing belt is too long, that means the cams are behind the crankshaft. They're retarded. And on a horizontally opposed motor like this, when you have one bank over here, one bank over here, that also means that on one side, this side, the difference in the head gasket thickness only affects these two cams by the thickness of the gasket being off. So if it was 12 thou, it's only 12 thou off, so the compression isn't really far off over here, or the cam timing isn't super far off over here. But if you think about that belt, it crosses this twice and then comes across the other side again. So now I have however thick it's off 3 times. Now the belt's definitely the wrong size over here, and so these cams on this side will be even more retarded than the cams on this side. So your compression difference from bank to bank. And sure enough, these were lower, which is what usually happens when you're retarded. You usually have lower compression. If you advance the timing, the compression goes up. Generally, I mean, obviously cam profile is going to affect all that. So we had 115 PSI on one bank, and yeah, it's got big cams and all that. We pull the heads off, it's got 10-to-1 compression pistons in it. And 10-to-1 compression pistons, if the engine was actually 10-to-1, should have been like 180 PSI, under a compression test. And we're at 115. And then you think about it having head gaskets that turned out to be way too thin, actually, and it should have been like 200 PSI compression. So now we're a little confused as to what's going on. We're trying to figure out why. With a piston that's sitting actually above the deck a little bit because it's been decked so much. These pistons were designed to be 12 thou below the deck like the factory pistons were. But they're actually parallel or a little above the deck based on which side we're on, which is another fun part of this whole deal. It means the compression of this thing should have been like 11-to-1. And which gives a cranking compression test, much higher than 115. So now we're trying to figure out what else is going on. But aside from that part being assembled wrong, there was the factor of 1,000 wheel horsepower. Now, what you don't see in this picture, these are factory size head studs. They're just the 625s, standard diameter 625s. Now, I don't know what you know about that, but standard diameter 625s are not going to do 1,000 wheel horsepower. Technically on an Acura dyno, you're lucky to get 6 out of something like that. And then we were told it had IAG closed deck, but I can't really identify what this system is. It doesn't have any stamps on it. I don't know if it's IAG or not. It doesn't look like IAG, unless it was one of their earlier things. And then we look at the rods, and they're just a standard looking, looks like maybe a BCH rod or something like that. There's no markings on the rod, so I can't really tell what it is, but I don't see this rod and then a standard high compression CP piston and factory size head studs coming anywhere near 1,000 wheel horsepower without the head lifting or a rod folding. So in this regard, the customer was extremely misled, and it's unfortunate, but we're not likely going to be upgrading all these components for him, so he's going to have to understand that his power limit is going to be much less than the 1,000 he was hoping for. Seeing as how we already changed the turbocharger and pulled the blower off, it's going to be just a really nice driving car right now at probably around 5.5 wheel until he's ready to put in some serious money into the upgrades on the engine itself to make it actually capable of 1,000 wheel. But again, if you're telling your customers one thing try and be accurate. You know, if they come to you with some stuff, you need to make sure that they did their homework, or that somebody else hasn't led them astray. In this case, this guy, great guy, has unfortunately been led astray by another shop, and he pumped a ton of money into his car, and pretty much everything has been incorrect or has been misrepresented for him. So, you know, please counsel your customers, back them up, make sure they're not being led astray by somebody else or the internet, because the internet's loaded with all kinds of fun shit, right? And let's try and get everybody, you know, on the same page. I think it'd be a lot of fun if we could all just go, all right, and have confidence that if someone shows up with something that they were led correctly, and we're not going, oh man, that shop, huh? Well, those guys never tell anybody the truth. It'd be nice if all of us had the same standard at some point. I know it's a pipe dream that I have, but you know, let's just try and, as a community, try and keep the information correct and lead people down the right path. So that's it. Happy New Year. See you around.